So we are going to have a Flyte community roundtable today. Consider this as a laid-back space to discuss about Flyte, be it Flyte's use cases or pain points. We encourage open-ended discussions, so please feel free to ask your questions and join the conversation. Today we have Nir Yungster, Prasad, Anirudh Sridhar, Guy Harrell, Eric Chen, and Nan Qin joining us. A big thank you to you all for agreeing to join the discussion. I am pretty excited for this. So without any further ado, let's get started. All right, Nir Yungster, could you let us know about yourself, the company you work at, and what you do?
Yeah, hi, thanks for having me. And I am the head of AI at a company called Sounder. I've just been there for a couple of months now, and fairly small company. Have a handful of machine learning or AI models, but not a lot of orchestration. I've used Airflow a lot in the past, and I'm looking at Flyte as a potential maybe better use case since the orchestration world has evolved to give us better tools on the machine learning side.
All right, thank you. So could you briefly talk about the use cases within your company that led you to use Flyte?
Well, we're not using Flyte yet. I'm just kind of getting started with playing with it. So I would say right now we have a lot of ad hoc, again, like no real orchestration, so a lot of ad hoc training or retraining of models. It's a small company where there's a bunch of models that have been trained maybe once or twice, but we're starting to need to invest a little bit more in making it easier to retrain and deploy models. So in our case, the model, I'll mention one of the types of things that we're trying to predict. So Sounder works with podcasts, and we're trying to make it possible for advertisers to know whether a podcast is suitable for their brand. And so there's some suitability guidelines that are out there, and those are the things that we're trying to make predictions on based on the audio file and the transcript that we generate from that. So things around like hate speech or profanity or other types of categories of brand suitability. And so basically the models that we train are based on things that we have internal annotators labeling, and so retraining those models is becoming more and more important, and it's time intensive today.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for the introduction. I'll get back to you again. And next, Prasad, could you unmute and introduce yourself? So which use cases are you using Flyte for?
I don't think Prasad is here. I don't see him.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So who else do we have?
It's Nan Qin.
Yeah. Could you unmute and introduce yourself, Nan?
Yeah. Myself is Nan Qin, and thanks for having me. I'm at a company called Protopia AI. We are providing solutions for data security, data privacy when using third-party machine learning or AI products like ChatGPT. And I'm managing the infrastructure platform for the model training and inference at Protopia. We use Flyte mostly for data processing and model training for both vision and NLP models. Flyte is great as we were able to split our large training scripts into smaller pieces, smaller tasks, and having being able to have caching for each task is a great resource saver if we need to rerun the workflow at some point. Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks for the introduction. And then we have Han. So Han, you have made significant contributions to Flyte. So could you please introduce yourself and share what inspired you to contribute to Flyte?
Okay, so actually I am just 21 years old and it's my right now it's my fourth year in my university, and actually I have set a goal like 900 days ago. My goal is to become the Google intern in Taiwan, and I didn't did it because of the layoff, and Taiwan's tech is lots of bit impacted. And my situation is like I have 3 internship before in Taiwan, and right now most of Taiwan's internship can't let can't uh let me learn too much things. And so I decided to join open source because open source can let me learn more things than other internships. Yes, because in Taiwan's internship, most of companies don't let intern to do something too important, or yes, and we don't have too much chance to deal with large scale system. But I think if I want to be a great engineer, I have to learn these stuff. And I just met Kevin, and he just said that he can guide me, so I just joined here. Yes.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. So each of you comes from various backgrounds and engages in different kinds of work. So with many workflow orchestration tools out there, how are you finding Flyte? Would any of you like to speak about that?
Me?
Sure. Please go
Oh,
ahead.
me? Oh, how to find the flights? Oh, actually, I just saw there. So Kevin is a PMC of Apache Submarine, and actually, I just search search open source on YouTube about like Taiwanese is doing open source. I just found that Kevin is guiding some students in Taiwan about Apache Submarine. So I joined the Apache Submarine meeting, and Kevin said you can do Flyte. Yes, yes. And actually, my goal to in Flyte is to learn how the backend works, but not about really the ML ops works. And I just come in and learn backend and just to know how ML ops works. But initially, that's not my goal. Yes, it's kind of a bonus for me. Yes, and it's great.
Okay, thank you. So Nir Yungster, could you talk about your experience with Flyte?
Yeah, again, so I'm coming as a very much a newcomer, and so my background is as an applied mathematician, and I'm having to wear a lot more hats in my current role, including trying to put this infrastructure into place where we can orchestrate. And where I came from last had a great team of engineers around me, where kind of from the ground up we built Airflow, and this is probably going back to like 2017, 2018. So there was like a huge amount of infrastructure that went into supporting Airflow. And I kind of see with Flyte the benefits of having kind of out of the box being able to partner with different Kubernetes in the cloud clusters is kind of my hope. So I'm talking more aspirationally and theoretically than in practice yet. My last role, we had a DevOps team that maintained a Kubernetes cluster where any could get deployed, and so now I'm kind of coming at it from the perspective of how can I get something sort of bootstrapped that both lets my team orchestrate workflows, data science workflows, without needing to know the details of everything on the Kubernetes side. It also is simple enough where we don't need to manage our own Kubernetes cluster, and hopefully also makes it easier to kind of like, and more natural to carry data around with us from task to task within a workflow.
So are you still testing things out on the demo cluster?
So right now I just came back from vacation, so I haven't done anything for the last week. But what I'm kind of like, and this is perfectly timed to hear that there's this presentation that David is going to do in a couple of days. Very much good timing, because I'm still kind of working through the getting things running in the cloud on AWS. So I've been doing a lot of local testing, getting things just from a demo perspective understood, and then I think the next step would be to try and run things in the cloud. We're kind of, when I say like we're early, like again, there's no orchestration, so everything is kind of manual here. So it's kind of an interesting scenario where we're both having to build the tasks themselves, and just want to make sure that we're starting on good footing, and that we're kind of picking an orchestration tool before we have the things to orchestrate per se.
Got it. And have you used Airflow to run machine learning pipelines, or have you also tried to run data pipelines?
Both in my previous role. So yeah, some of them were like NLP models, but a lot of it was data pipelining.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Nan Qin, so how has it been working with Flyte for you?
Yeah, so I started doing MLOps using Kubeflow as an orchestration tool for managing training jobs, data processing jobs, etc. I mean, Kubeflow is great, but it's not, the learning curve is kind of a little bit difficult for a typical data scientist without experience or knowledge of things like Kubernetes. And yeah, when I joined Protopia, we had very unique requirements regarding regarding the basically the MLOps platform we want to use and we want to deploy to the cloud. And yeah, I evaluated a few things like Flyte, Kubeflow, and I think Flyte is great in terms of simplicity to pick up for a data scientist to pick up, and the UI is awesome. Yeah, we had some questions, problems running different kind of jobs, workflows on Flyte, and the community is really great. I got a lot of help from the Slack channels, both deployment with special configurations, and also troubleshooting the issues we had when deploying and running the workflows.
So are any of your ML engineers or data scientists using Flyte? How's their experience with it?
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, are any of your ML engineers or data scientists using Flyte?
Am I using Flyte as a data scientist, or my team?
Yeah, I guess
so
in your
in your team, are there any data scientists or
Yeah,
ML engineers? So how
yeah.
are they finding Flyte?
There is a little bit, there are a few things to learn before they can write correct and efficient workflows and tasks. Basically I created a few wrappers around Flyte objects according to our typical use cases, and created a few different example workflows, example tasks for them as a reference. So so far things are I would say so far the things are moving pretty well for them.
Good to know.
Was there anything, sorry to jump in, I was curious, was there anything you learned from building those tools for your users that we could take as like a feature request on the Flyte side, or was it more, tuning it to your specific, the way you access data or like common tools that you use?
Most of the things are just very specific to our use cases. I guess if there's one thing I find might be useful is to maybe enable all the things you can do with flight control in the Python API. For example, if I want to create a project, I cannot do it with Python API. I need to do it with flight control. Sometimes it's it's not very convenient. And yeah, on AWS we had issues getting resources from like getting resources like A100 GPUs these days, and I think there could be some improvement in terms of timeout when some of the resources are available, but not all of them are available. Things like that.
Awesome. Thanks. Maybe I'll ping you on the community so we could chat a little bit more about those scheduling, fun stuff around scheduling.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, I don't know. I had a couple of questions for the three of you or anyone else here in the call. First one will be, we already heard you all have different levels of familiarity with the project, which is perfect. So in your impression so far, or your experience so far, what are those things that you would like to see the project improving? Nan already shared a couple of them, but those things that you've struggled with, or that in general your wish list for a platform or workflow orchestrator, the kind of stuff that you'd like to see in Flyte. So I don't know if my question is clear, and if who wants to start.
I'll just mainly I've been working with the documentation, and I think this may sound, maybe it's familiar to you guys, but it may sound strange. I kind of found myself getting lost in the documentation, where I was unsure like how I was navigating it at times, and I found I think there's part of the issue is that there's a lot of ways to do things the same thing, and so I was like, wait a second, wasn't I looking at this somewhere else and they were suggesting a different way? So yeah, that was one thing where I found myself kind of not really sure where I was at times as I was going through tutorials or documentation.
Definitely, Nir. I'm with you. Thank you. Who else?
Okay, so I think Flyte's documentation is better than lots of open source documentation and better than some companies I have been before. But I think is if I want to be a contributor as a student, I think it still need to go through more details, and maybe I will work on it later. Yes, because I think as a student, or maybe I don't have that much or work experience, sometimes I will still need to ask lots of questions in Slack or ask Kevin that he can help me go through the the beginning, and after I know how to contribute, then I don't need to ask that much question. But I think the beginning is still there are still some place I think maybe we can have something like a knowledge graph that I can have a deeper understanding to flights. Yes, knowledge graph maybe is like heptare base. There is maybe this kind of uh software, no software to make the knowledge graph. Yes. Okay.
Thank you. Yeah, definitely that's a common theme in yeah, there are some ideas around how to fix this, but probably in many of them we will need the help of the community. So yeah, thank you. And I know you already have contributed back to the contributing guide, which is really interesting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, who else? Also give some feedback. Right. All right. And my next question was I mean, last week I was listening to a podcast episode. It was an interview in the MLOps community podcast. And there was this sentence that it still resonated in my mind. It was like, yeah, the ML and data, in general, the AI ecosystem has a lot of tools. It's not short of tools. There are a lot of tools, frameworks out there. It's very fragmented. So it will be great if there will be some abstraction layer on top of many of these tools and frameworks that will let data scientists define what they want, focus on their code, and forget about everything else. And seems like the kind of the observation from the guest was that there's no such a thing right now. Is it too far of a stretch to think that Flyte, at least in theory, is designed to be that kind of abstraction platform? At least, I mean, this is a question for three guests, but in general to everyone else here. Am I right or too optimistic to think that Flyte could become that abstraction layer at some point? Yeah, the answer could be no.
I mean, I think that's a good goal. I think it would be great. I do wonder myself sometimes. I get lost in thinking about what's the right combination of tools that is kind of like the MVP of like a data organization. And I think you probably don't want to be too many things at once on one hand, you know, if there are good tools for certain things, but yeah, the fewer tools that it kind of takes to be kind of that structure, I think the better. But yeah, it's a good thought experiment.
Engineer. Yeah, absolutely. It's a good goal and almost impossible one. But right. Who else? Do you all think? Or in general, what will be that wish list or the requirements that you will think for a abstraction, the abstraction layer that AI needs? Where else? Nan, you have any thoughts around this? Asking to.
I'm sorry, I was multitasking. Can you repeat the question?
It's yeah, probably it's a too complicated question, but in general, I was asking if you also feel that the AI ecosystem is too fragmented in terms of many tools, many frameworks, and there's a need for an abstraction layer. So kind of the question would be if you see that probably Flyte has some of the elements that will help it become that abstraction layer. If not, what would be your requirements for a true abstraction layer to handle the chaos in the AI ecosystem?
Yeah, I totally agree that the tools, the libraries available out there for ML and MLOps are growing and fragmented. I think a nice thing with Flyte I really like is the integration with all with those tools like Ray, Kubeflow, Training Job. Yeah, I do hope to see more, plugins integrations with other tools that can make things seem easier to configure and to run basically.
Thank you.
Yeah, I could chime in a little bit. At least from what we're seeing at MemVerge, there's a lot of new hardware coming out to the market, like data center hardware, which is enabling some new architectures. And the faster we can kind of upstream the simplicity of accessing different types of hardware, especially like larger memory systems, it'll probably make it easier for like AI developers as well to like optimize how their models run, and also like bring down the cost of a production environment as well. So it's still early, but we're really excited by some of the things that we're seeing.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, that opens a whole new chapter on this conversation because my background is infrastructure mainly, and sometimes I feel that right now the bottleneck for AI is on hardware. And it's mainly infrastructure and hardware, as some others mentioned for example, the lack of availability of GPUs in cloud providers and stuff. So probably if there are vendors out there or projects that help moving execution to other layers in the hardware, not only GPUs, but yeah, probably what MemVerge is doing using memory. By the way, they will be an episode. I think it's next meeting that MemVerge will be presenting here. So it's great to have Jean here. But yeah, I feel like there are projects popping up. I saw last week other projects a project that is trying to also move inference and all these kind of workloads to CPUs and not relying on GPUs. So yeah, it's funny to see all this crazy innovation happening on the hardware space.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's another chapter. The whole what can CPUs actually do where you don't actually need the GPU. But we're seeing some of that on the bioinformatics side of things too. If you can make your algorithm, if you can make your algorithms work a certain way like we're seeing some of the next generation sequencing workloads, you can actually run them really well on CPUs. So looking for ways to, yeah, use CPUs more since they're more available.
That's awesome. Thank you, Jing. All right. Yeah, I don't know. Back to you, Samita. Is there any other question?
Yeah. Does anyone have any more questions?
I guess like from the Flyte.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead,
Hey,
Joe.
everyone. Oh yeah, cool. Yeah, now you can see my face. So yeah, just on the Flyte side, we generally see it appeals to platform engineers first because it meets a list of requirements that they have for a system. I'd love to understand like just more about the next jump to like the user, the person kind of like writing the code to of the task. And I guess like there's different flavors of it, and I'm trying to figure out what's like the prototypical pattern. Like, is it typically like a platform engineer will actually set up the structure of the workflow? And if so, like, is that really a platform engineer, or is that like also kind of a fusion between a workflow author and a platform creator? Whereas like, I guess like what are the users, what role, where is the gap or where is the line drawn typically between like the ML engineer writing Flyte code and the platform engineer taking care of the platform? Or is it like pretty blurry?
Yeah, I can talk about it from my experience, because I am basically managing the platform. So I'm the ML ops engineer here, and like I said, I created example notebook, example workflows, example tasks, and our data scientists and ML engineers are the actual task and workflow writer to create to create and run workflows on the platform.
Awesome.
Yeah, I'll say on our side, I guess it's different in the sense that we're small. We have yeah, a very small sort of technical team, and a lot of it is the platform, so to speak, is focused on just kind of like the ingestion of podcasts, right? Like the keeping various things running that our customers use, but less so like the ML ops side. And so I think like there isn't any distinction between those two at our size, and so we kind of have to have a tool that is both accessible to machine learning sort of data scientists, and one that they can then sort of operate with. But yeah, I think
Yeah, that's great context. And I group users into kind of two categories, and this can be wrong, but like one of them is like a software engineer that taught themselves machine learning, and the other is like a scientist or a statistician that taught themselves to write scripting and code. And I guess like my hunch is that Flyte tends to appeal to the former more than the latter, but we would love to like learn how to appeal to kind of everyone. So I guess like from your just recent comment, it sounded like you were working with kind of more of like the scientist statistician types, and you're looking to build a platform for them. And so I'd love to know like, are there gaps around like, are you going to build like a Jupyter Hub, like notebook system to kind of do an extra layer of abstraction to make it simpler? Just curious about how you're thinking of doing that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm myself am more the latter. I've been sort of in tech long enough where I've through osmosis learned enough coding where I have, I hope, better practices than most just fresh statisticians. But I don't think that I've seen a lot of the examples where people are using Jupyter, and I think that that's great. And I think that is typically how people are doing kind of experimentation. And when I say people, it's really like two other people besides myself. But the training that's happening is very ad hoc, and so it's run something on, and a lot of it is like leftover where we've had like some turnover, and so people who were before us, we're running things in Google Cloud, and so there's like there's just kind of like a passed on like lore of how did this model actually get trained, and so I don't think that using Jupyter is what I'd like to see happen. I think I just want to see that we have the ability to reproduce. Like the scientist in me wants to be able to reproduce the steps for making a model and being able to trace what was the data that was used for as training data and evaluation data, and make sure that we're actually able to speak clearly about what we have and don't have.
Awesome. Thanks. That's great context. Thank you.
Sure. I actually had a question, maybe again, another beginner question, but we are mainly an AWS shop, but we do have kind of like maybe a preference for running certain things on Google Cloud, just from a cost perspective with GPUs, and just curious if that's like a common thing that people in the Flyte community are working with, or if there's like if this is like a solved issue of like how people have set things up for that.
David, do you want to answer that?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't have data to see what's the percentage of users running on AWS or GCP or Azure, but we see an important fraction of the community running on GCP. We're working on some resources to automate the entire thing. And there's an old guide out there that helps you at least manually to prepare the environment. But yeah, I mean, right now there are users running Flyte on GCP. So yes, it's totally feasible to run it there. I don't know if what you mean is running workloads on both.
Yeah, so like I think, for example, our typical, again, I wouldn't call it a workflow, but I would say like manual workflow would be to train on GCP and then deploy on AWS. And so like, I guess, I don't know what the consequences are, if that's a typical pattern, and if so, like, setting up orchestrators on, both platforms, or like what would be the kind of sort of setup that would let one accomplish something like that.
I can try to answer that, Nir. I have a couple of questions actually. When you say deploy, what exactly do you mean?
Basically having it's an open question as well. So the model hosting is happening in AWS. So the model file is in S3. And right now it's not a standalone kind of microservice. It actually just gets spun up ad hoc by essentially the core engineering team when we're processing like new podcasts that come in or something like that. But that could change in the future as well.
It sounds like maybe this is sort of offline. Like, is batch offline, like inference or whatever, part of like things that you're considering? And is that why you're asking about maybe deploying like Flyte or actually using Flyte in AWS as well? Like, just trying to understand that part.
I think so there's a few things that are missing from what we do so we have basically two main engineering teams. One is kind of like the AI research team, and the other one is the core, I guess you could call, platform team, but doesn't really have like an MLOps flavor to it. And so when I think of orchestration, I'm thinking about training, evaluation, and then deployment of the model eventually. And deployment meaning like either just putting it into the target location where the core team is expecting it, or potentially deploying a service that hosts the model as an endpoint. So today that kind of end location is in AWS S3. And also like the, so I guess maybe it's something where there are other workflows that maybe aren't machine learning that I think Flyte would benefit us as well to do. And we just have everything that we do is mostly in AWS. So I think I guess it's kind of like the odd one out is training is usually something that we've done in Google Cloud. Again, doesn't necessarily have to be, but what I've heard is from a cost perspective, like A100s are cheaper. And so that's the preference, but hopefully that answered.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I would say like there's at least two deployment models that could work, right? I think one is you can just put a control plane in GCP and another control plane in AWS. So control plane data plane in GCP, control plane data plane in AWS. They'll have two separate endpoints basically. And then there is a boundary, right? And the boundary could be that a model archive from Google Cloud gets pushed to an S3 bucket on AWS, and then there's like there could be like watchers or whatever there that you can use to like automatically deploy these model archives once they drop in S3 bucket notifications and whatnot. The other model, and I think for a long time I hadn't seen this out in the wild, but I think it's like starting to come up quite a bit today, is this single control plane multi-data plane model, where you might have a single control plane either on Google Cloud, or I imagine it'll probably be in AWS for you guys, and then a data plane cluster that lives on GCP and another one that lives on AWS. And you can choose where workflows would schedule. So you can say like your training workflows would schedule on your GCP data plane, and the rest of the stuff can like work on the AWS data plane, right? And then there's a whole bunch of like complexity around things like auth and everything, but there have definitely been teams, like I think I've seen in the open source Flyte Slack, that have actually done this successfully. They've done the multi-data plane, single control plane successfully. I'm not sure that they've done the multi-cloud, but I don't imagine it'll be like all that different, from like a glue standpoint. Once you figure out how to like actually deploy a successful data plane on the different clouds.
Yeah, I think I think the heart of my question is there like a Flyte way of kind of handling that? And I think the answer is maybe like it's just there isn't like a necessarily a right way to preferred way to do it. It's maybe kind of like not solved, or not I shouldn't say not solved. It's not there's not like a wrong way.
Yeah, I think that's it. It comes down to what you guys want and like the isolation boundaries that you want to set in your engineering team, right? So like at my previous company, we ran a separate cluster entirely for like development, and then for production, and then for research we also ran a separate cluster for like dev research and production research and stuff like that. So we had like lots of boundaries. But I've seen other companies where like they have a single like control plane that supports like research production as like separate projects and domains in Flyte. And I believe that's what Lyft was doing, which is why like you see these like abstractions around like projects and domains in Flyte, right? And so I think it comes down to like how you want to define like your project boundaries, and how you want to like establish sort of isolation between your different projects and like the different sort of scopes that you're working on. But I think it would be like, it would be up to your infrastructure team or like your architecture.
Makes sense.
But yeah. Well, if you have more questions about this, I'd love to follow up on that.
Yeah, I'll definitely take you up if they come up.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks everyone for your time and participation. And if there are no more questions, then the next community sync is on October 3rd. See you all then. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.